All right. I'm gonna hope that we are rolling. Uh, okay. It looks like we're rolling. Sounds like we're rolling. Hello. Welcome to my apparently new podcast studio. Everyone apparently wanted me to do a podcast for this capstone, and I am going to do that. I've got my comfy clothes on. I got my Gary the Snail socks on. I've got like a loose script I'm gonna follow, but mostly I'm just here to talk about what I'm here to talk about. Uh, this is my childhood bedroom, man. You're in you're in my comfort zone. Got my all of my archery medals displayed above my head here. I've got the chicken with the egg coming out of his butt as a desk lamp or desk light. That's my pride and joy. Uh, it's not sponsored by Fiji, but I've got Fiji water. But we are here to talk about something that I think is very important. There's a groundhog right outside of my window. Sorry. Um, I am here to talk about something I think is really important, and it's a really important skill whenever it comes to the the humanities, English, all of that. So I want everyone to be honest with me, okay? All of you, look me in the eyes, right? Look me in the eyes. I know there may be some English teachers around or watching, whatever. Look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. When was the last time you were assigned a reading in one of your classes? Could be college, could be high school, doesn't matter. When was the last time you were assigned a reading and you looked at that reading and you were like, oh my gosh, this is like ancient text? Even if it wasn't like Old English or nothing like that, even if it wasn't like Shakespearean Richard III, I don't know what's happening right now. Even if it wasn't any of that, just like an older text that's completely just random. You feel like there's nothing to it. You feel like it shouldn't be a thing anymore. Be honest with me. Have you ever had that feeling? When was the last time that happened? Like, there had to be a time. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. A lot of people will look at these readings that are from 100 to 150 years ago, some even more. I'm just saying, like, mostly like 100 to 150 years ago. And they go, why am I still learning about this? Like, this stuff is old, man. Like, this stuff is ancient literature. This was written in a whole other time period. There's no way this stuff can still be relevant, and this is still being taught. Like, hold on. I made a list. I made a list of things that didn't exist 100 years ago from today. Things that didn't exist. Let me give you a little rundown of what didn't exist 100 years ago. If my iPad will cooperate with me. Here's a list of things that didn't exist 100 years ago. I told you my iPad is giving me issues. Cell phones, Walmart, McDonald's. There was no McRib 100 years ago. The NFL and the NBA. Refrigerators, microwaves, hair dryers, penicillin. 100 years ago today, 100 years ago today, penicillin did not exist, right? If you look at pieces before 1850, there's a lot of literature that is studied from before 1850. Basketball as a sport, the actual idea of basketball not being, like, the actual idea of basketball existing did not exist. The radio didn't exist. Potato chips didn't exist before 1850. Actually, I think it was 1857 those came around. Not important. Get this. Easy access to toilet paper did not exist before 1850. So you're telling me we are learning about pieces of literature from before a time period where toilet paper didn't exist. Or we're learning about this stuff before stuff from before toilet paper existed. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time saying that. Not to mention the internet. Just, to throw that out there. The internet didn't exist, obviously. The stuff that I looked up, like the thing I used to look up what didn't exist, the thing I'm using to record this video, didn't exist. The platform you're watching this on, YouTube, didn't exist. Anyways, I mean, how could pieces so unbelievably old possibly be, and so hard to understand too, especially if we're going back to what I was mentioning, like Richard III, by Shakespeare. Just pieces that are so hard to understand and so unbelievably old. How are those pieces still around? Why are we still teaching that to students, right? And that's something that you've probably asked at one point in time because you've been so frustrated with something you've read. So, I want to say that these pieces are actually really important. I've been joking around, but this is actually a little bit serious. These pieces are super important to anyone who is going for an English degree, or anyone who's going for any degree, actually. Like, literally, these skills that I'm about to talk about there's potential to use these in any field that you can go into. I mean, criminal justice is a big one. Biology is a big one. Nursing is a big one. Like, all of these different fields and stuff. Business as well. Business has one in here that I think is really crucial for them. There's a lot of skills that you can learn from reading these older texts that you may not even think about until I bring it up, and it kind of baffled me whenever I was thinking about it. So I want to start, and I mean, not to mention, like, these are going to be real world skills you can use whenever you graduate and you go off to your job. Even if you have an English degree and you're not able to get a job within your field, if you have to take something else, the skills you learned from that English degree is going to be stuff that employers are going to want to see. And I'm going to tell you about that. So I want to paint you this image, and I have to get this pulled up because I don't know it off the top of my head. If things will cooperate, you can see I'm having a difficult time here. I want to pull this quote up from Richard III. So I want you to like envision this this scenario. Close your eyes. I don't know. Close your eyes. Bow your head. Whatever you do to like imagine that you are somewhere. Whatever it is, do that and hear me out. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to imagine you have sat down in your first English class, right? You've sat down in your first English class, and your professor has handed you Richard III by Shakespeare. And they've assigned this to you. They've not handed it to you. Let's say assigned, because everything's on this now. Let's say you decide, hey, I'm just going to flip to a random part in here and see what this sucker's about. Why not? So you flip through, scroll through, whatever you want to say. You go through the reading and you see this. And I quote, by the way, "Tush, fear not, my lord. We will not stand to prate. Talkers are no good doers. Be assured we come to use our hands and not our tongues." Okay, so what is prate, right? Like, if you are just now sitting down, learning, like, starting into English and stuff like that, which I don't know why you would ever get Richard III to start, but anyways, like, if you're just starting, you're gonna look at that one stanza, that one little area, that one little quote, and you're gonna be like, "Oh my God, what the heck is prate? What did they come to do? What are they talking about? Like, what? I can't understand what's being said because the language is different, right?" But you've got so many questions going on in your head, but then you start to like take your time. You start to like really pick it apart. You start to add up all the contextual clues. You start to think about you start to think about everything that is being said around it, even around it, like within the story, and you start to piece it together. You start to know what this word means, know what that word means. You start to understand what the heck prate means, and then you're like, oh, wait. So he's just saying that he thinks people that are kind of all talk are like bad, and he's just threatening violence because he says that he's not there to just prate. And he says he's going to use his hands and not our tongues. Oh, that was easy, right? Yes. It becomes easier whenever you grow patience. And patience is what I think is a very crucial skill that an English major who studies like these older texts teaches you. That's why I think it's really important that we get these older texts, is because it teaches you patience. So I want to talk about, like, what do you do with this in your career? Well, I mean, patience is useful in any career you could possibly go into. A writer needs to stay patient and make sure that what they're writing is like of good quality in the way that they want it to be. An editor needs to make sure that whatever they're like piecing together or they're combing through, like they want to take their time with it and make sure that it's good. They want to make sure that it is solid and they're not skipping over anything. And they want to make sure they hit every single thing they can. So they have to be patient with it. A teacher, not a teacher or a professor, not only do they have to be patient whenever it comes to like lesson planning and grading and all of that, they also have to deal with us, like me and you. If you are a student, they have to deal with us. And that's that you need patience for that. But not only like in the English field, like think about it. People in the criminal justice field, or a biology major, nursing, all of that requires you to be patient. You have to have patience. You know, not like that, like with a nursing degree, not patient, whatever. If you're given easy readings with like modern day English, it's a lot harder. I mean, you still have to have patience and comb through stuff to understand things. But with these older texts like Richard III, it does take a lot of patience to like understand what's really going on. And for me personally, while I've been here at UPike, so for every skill that I talk about, I want to comb through and like I want to look at which piece really like hammered that in for me personally. And for me on this skill, I want to say that it was the Mirror Stage by Jacques Lacan, I think is how you say his name. It's not exactly 100 years old yet. It's about 90 years old, which I still think falls under this category. But let me pull this over here so I can talk about this. Let me get a drink first. You're gonna watch me awkwardly take a sip real quick. If you could hear me gulping, I'm so sorry. But anyways, so like I said, the piece is not exactly 100 years old yet, but it is like 90 years old. So I had this piece whenever I took literary criticism, and I read it 2 times to start out, right? I read it 2 times to start out, and I was like, oh no. Like, I was so confused. I was like legitimately debating skipping class just to be able to, just because I didn't want to talk about it in class. But I didn't know what it was talking about. Like, and whenever I started to understand it, I was like, wait a second. This piece is about the idea that a baby sees itself in the mirror and thinks like, yo, that's me. What the heck is so important about that, dude? It's just him being like, oh yeah, that's me in that mirror. What's so important about that? But then I read it another 2 times and I slowed down. I stayed patient. I actually read what it was saying and I thought about it. And I was like, wait. Lacan is saying that the moment where a baby looks into a mirror and says, that's me, and saying that in that moment,
the baby creates who he is in his mind. But he's creating himself based off of an illusion. He doesn't know who he truly is. The mirror is telling him who he is. Kind of like society may do to him, or just like his parents may do to him. Maybe his friends will do to him. But he's also began creating this image of himself based on what something is telling him that he is, instead of what he truly is. Because he has yet to figure that out. He's began developing this ego, which is the crucial word in the text, and he's built it based on an illusion. I'm going to get up and I'm going to do this because my computer kicked off and I need to make sure that this is still recording. Thank God. Okay. Sorry about that. But like it took me 4 times, like I just said. It took me 4 times. I think it was a total of 3 hours because I actually like took my time the next 2 times. And I felt like I was good at fast reading. Like I felt like I could actually understand everything and just be like, "Oh, I understand that. Moving on. Oh, I understand that. Moving on." But this is the piece that I remember kind of sucker punched me. It just like bang, and I was down. It was like a UFC fight, and I lost. And I mean, I did end up going to class that day after I actually sat down and focused on the piece and took my time and was patient with it. I went to class, and I mean, it went fine. I joined the discussion, and I learned that I need to be more patient with everything else I read. I mean, it was that simple. Like, it really showed me this skill that I was learning, and I didn't know I was learning. I had done it before, but now I was seeing it. And I'm now going to be able to take that patience outside of college and really implement that into whatever I do in the future. So I think that's a really important skill that you learn reading these older texts that you don't really see. You don't really see that you're learning that. So the next skill is also one that I think is like highly useful if you're a writer or an editor, but it's useful for any English like major, any English related field. It's useful for. In fact, I actually think it's like really useful in the criminal justice field, because that's whenever you read older texts, you start to understand deeper meanings. You understand like deeper meanings and motives. And the key word there is kind of motives, even though the way I talk about it makes it sound like I'm only discussing meaning. But the key word is really motive whenever it comes to the criminal justice side. But I do believe that you can learn both. Yes, I sit with my feet like this sometimes. I'm sorry if it looks weird. I didn't bring my ottoman in here for me to prop my feet on, so I'm going to look a little weird with my feet. I'm sorry. Anyways. Like back in the day, I feel like authors were a lot more creative with what they put out whenever they were trying to get their ideas across. Today you can open up like an online news article, or even like some of the books that you read, like you buy them from Walmart or Barnes and Noble. And if they're a newer book, they feel like they're kind of just sucker punching you with the information. They feel like they're kind of like just handing you the information on a platter without having you dig for it. And it's not just books. I mean, like movies and songs, everything is doing that these days because they know our attention span is basically taken out, back, and shot. But like, back to reading older texts, like it feels like nowadays you can't find texts that are creative and trying to get a point across in a creative way. And these older texts that do have this creativity and do have this ability to hide deeper meaning within what they're creating it's really intricate, and it's really good for us to read because you're actively learning how to search something and dig deeper and look for that deeper meaning and those motives. If you're a writer, you want to be able to do this with your own pieces. You don't want everything to be surface level. You want to learn how you can take something, your idea, your central idea, and you can put that meaning into a creative way and have readers dig for it and leave it open to interpretation for other people to find it in other ways. You know what I mean? As an editor, You need to be able to know what your story is like talking about. Whatever you're piecing together, you want to be sure that you know what the meaning is behind it. If you don't agree with something, that you can't just leave it out because it may be intricate to what the deeper meaning is. You have to understand that deeper meaning in order to keep it moving and add it on there. I'm sorry if this is distracting. There was a severe thunderstorm warning like 30 minutes ago, and it's still just blinking. Just ignore it. I mean, once again, with the same three like ones I keep bringing over and over and over. If you're a teacher, you need this skill because you can give your students something that can make their minds work on this skill. I feel like especially at an early level, because not a lot of teachers and stuff English wise in high school and like elementary school, middle school, all of that, they really don't teach this. I really didn't like. I don't know if it was because I wasn't paying enough attention or what, but I feel like I didn't really learn this in high school. And whenever I got to college is where I started like looking and understanding things deeper and deeper. But I just think it's really good to like start this up at an early age. Like even as a librarian's a good one because you need to understand like what books have what certain like types of deeper meaning. Like let's say I went to the library and I wanted to find a book that was like talking about, or like I wanted to find a book or something that was discussing like homophobia. Like if I'm doing a report on the history of like homophobia or something, and I wanted to find a really good piece that was creative and talked about that, the librarian would be able to help me with that. So as a librarian, that skill is also really good. And even outside of the English major, I mean, if you're looking at criminal justice, that, like I said, criminal justice is a major one for this because that's like if you are an investigator or a lawyer, anything like that, you want to understand deeper meanings and motives. Like that's something that you want to base your job around. That's a central skill to that degree. Nursing and doctoring, you want to understand deeper meanings to what the patient has had in the past. Like that can actually help save lives. If you have something you can understand like deeper meanings and stuff too. Like if you see something very surface level, you may think, oh, that's nothing, let's not worry about that. No, you want to investigate that further because you may end up saving someone's life. Even if you're a business majors are another really good one for this because it helps you understand why a product is selling or not selling as well. Like let's say that you're a business major, you're a business owner, and you have a product that's selling really well in a certain area. You want to be able to understand why is that selling so well there. Like maybe it blew up on social media. Maybe it's a much needed product in that certain area. Like let's say you own a cleaning supply company. Let's say you own a cleaning supply company and your product is selling really well in an area that just received flooding. Wonder why I'm bringing that up. Anyways, that why that product is selling so well there. It's a deeper meaning. If it's not selling so well, maybe it's not as good as a competitor, or maybe it has some flaws that you need to iron out before you re-release it. Like a business major needs to understand deeper meaning and motives behind the products and sales numbers. This is a central skill to literally almost every job, like every career job bubble you can think of. Sorry, I need to take another drink. I wish I could throw like Subway Surfers or something up while I'm drinking. That way you all I keep your all's minds going, kind of like a TikTok or whatever. But the piece I want to turn to for this is something I read in a British literature class, and it's titled "A Modest Proposal." It's by Jonathan Swift. It was written in 1729, and on first read, it kind of catches you off guard because the proposal is Irish families selling their babies to richer families so the richer families have a food source. Yep. That reaction you have is mine as well when I first read this. Like it's supposed to mean like both the rich and poor families can walk away from the situation with a gain in a time with such like short food supply, and in a time where Great Britain and like all of them are like devouring Ireland, hence the food nod. Um, it creates a new food market for the country, and it creates essentially a job that any grown adult can technically do. As weird as that sounds, it's still a job that any grown adult can partake in. And it sounds genuine, like he's actually trying to get this idea approved, but what he's doing is he is just like, if you look at the allusions, you look at like the period surrounding the piece, you see that he's taking shots at the British higher ups that are economically exploiting Ireland. He's usually using the situation of like the wealthy people eating the poor babies to show how Britain is like devouring, like I said earlier, devouring Ireland. Um, and he's using this like somewhat shock factor to draw attention to how bad things are getting in Ireland and how bad things are getting whenever it comes to how Britain is exploiting Ireland. So he's using this to sound he's trying to sound brutal because he's hoping it draws attention to the point. And like that's like understanding that, looking at everything around it, understanding the deeper motive behind a piece that seems like it's just a little like one-off gag or something. Understanding that context and understanding that meaning behind it is a skill that you learn from like reading these older texts. Like I would have taken that as a really weird like Mad Comics sketch or something, but it's an actual really meaningful piece trying to show the exploitation of Ireland. So that's another skill that you can learn by reading these older texts. Something that's really valuable to anyone in the job, the real world. I need another drink, man. I am a thirsty guy. I don't know why. I knew this would happen too. That's why I've got a backup right here. I knew it was going to happen. I knew I was just going to like start downing water as time went on. Anyways, the next skill is very useful for all the careers. I keep saying very useful for English as well as other careers. At this point, it's useful for any career. If it's different than that, I will specify that. But the next skill is really useful because it's like the skill is understanding patterns. And I feel like understanding patterns, especially for criminal justice, is really, really important, and it's a skill that you learn from these older texts that really help you in these types of situations. In writing, you have to understand these elements before you can implement them into your own writing and add those small details for people to pick up on. As an editor, you may want to explore someone's previous writings to see patterns that they carry with them throughout all of their pieces. If you want to like remove something from something you're doing, like let's say you are working for a news station and you're piecing together a newscast, and they have a certain piece in there that they always like try to include. You can't just be like, hey, we need to remove this because there's a reason it's there. That's a pattern. It's always there. As a teacher, this skill is useful because like you want to look for the patterns within readings, and you want to be able to show the students these specific patterns. You want to be able to show them like how these connect, because it's just important for them to learn about that. And like this skill is also crucial to, like I said, criminal justice majors, especially lawyers or investigators or cops or anything like that, when you need to look for patterns within criminals to try and navigate like what to do next, what's going to be their next move, what should we do, stuff like that. It's really, really important. As a nurse or doctor, understanding a pattern may help save someone's life. Psychiatrists are a specific type of doctor I think about with this, because it can help with diagnosing mental disorders. But nurses and doctors can also use this to prescribe medicines if you have like a long-term history with having a certain illness. Like me personally, I'm a carrier for strep. You can probably guess how that went my whole childhood. I was in the hospital almost every month. Uh, but like I'm a carrier for strep, and eventually they were just like, every time I would go in, they would do tests, but they would be like, we're gonna start giving you this medicine because we think it can help alleviate like how often you're getting this, because you have a pattern every time you come in, strep, 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 strep. So they identified that pattern, and I've not. This is fake wood, but I'm gonna knock on it anyways. I've not had strep in 2 years. So they identified that pattern, and they helped me by prescribing me medicines for an underlying condition. So that's why understanding patterns is a good skill. And I think the reading that really hammered this in, oh, my computer turned off. I'm so sorry. Give me 1 second. This is like the worst podcast of all time. Anyways, I think the reading that really hammered this home for me was The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, one of my favorite pieces of all time. It was published in 1892, so it fits the criteria. And it's a story about a woman who's mentally ill but keeps being downplayed and ignored by her husband, who's keeping her basically hostage in a bedroom with yellow wallpaper. I read this for my appreciation of literature class, but I've read this a lot. Like, even my girlfriend, who doesn't like reading, has read this piece. So this piece gets around, but every time I read it, I keep seeing a pattern within the wallpaper itself. Not the pattern that's on the wallpaper. Hold on. Not like that. I mean a pattern within the wallpaper itself. Not the... Anyways. Like... how do I explain this? Okay. The pattern is that the woman is falling down, right? So she would continue to decline over the course of the story, but in her head she was getting better. Like she felt like she was getting better because she was getting more and more what we would see as that she was declining more and more. She went from being confined and bored to being obsessed and what people would say psychotic. She felt like she was bettering herself, especially when she ripped the wallpaper off the wall to free the shadow that was within the wall. Like, she felt like she was bettering herself. She felt like she was doing something, but instead she was just looking more and more psychotic. She was losing her mind more and more. And that was a pattern that was throughout the entirety of the story, was if it looked like to me and you that she was starting to lose her mind more and more, to her, she was actually gaining herself back more and more in a way. And I felt like that was really powerful whenever you're learning the skill of patterns. And I mean, understanding patterns like this is a skill that a lot of older pieces can teach you. Once again, not every reading, but a lot of readings today are, more on the nose because they know attention spans are declining. Like I said, whenever I took a drink, I was like, I have to put Subway Surfers up here somewhere or something like that. But they're quick to point out their own patterns. I've noticed that a lot in some readings lately, where I'll read it and they're quick to point out, like they'll build up a pattern, and then they'll just be like, yeah, that's a pattern, guys. In case you didn't see that, in case you didn't see what just happened back there, that's like a reoccurring thing. Just so you know, and it's like, bro, I got it. Like, I understood that. Why are you treating me like I'm 4 years old? And that's another reason these older readings are necessary, because if you were to teach all modern readings, you're gonna run out. You're gonna teach every reading until at one point you've ran out of pieces that actually have that deeper pattern within them that you can teach people and show people. So you have to keep looking back at pieces like The Yellow Wallpaper that have this pattern within them, and you have to just keep teaching those. You know what I'm thinking? While it's daylight outside, I'm gonna unplug my boy if I can. He is like grabbing onto the freaking That was so much harder than it had to be. Did you see how much I struggled doing that? I'm so sorry. Also, sorry for swearing there. But anyways, while it's daylight outside, we're going to rock with this because I am definitely getting a headache. Anyways, so another skill that I think is good to have and to show employers is diversity of thought. Now, this is a really interesting one and a really important one in my opinion. Sorry. I lost my place on my notes. Oh, diversity of thought. Being able to think about things in a diverse way, like not just in situational like problem solving, not in that type of way, but like whenever it comes to a diverse mind. Oh my gosh, like race, sexuality, and all of that. Like having a diverse and open mind is such a crucial key to like is such a crucial skill to have these days. And this skill comes from many different readings and is one of the most common skills you can gather from doing like readings and reading analysis and all of that. When you're breaking down a text, you're understanding new ways or different ways of thinking. If there is a definite way to kind of read a story, if everyone agrees that there is one central like idea or understanding about a certain reading, and you read it and you're like, actually, I see it like this. You've discovered a new way of seeing things. You can be like, oh shoot, you have an argument there. You've demonstrated diverse thinking. And, for writers, this skill is important because you want to have a moral and a meaning to your stories, but you also want to leave something up to interpretation, like I mentioned earlier. Sorry, this headache is making my brain scramble so bad. I apologize that I'm like starting to get more scatterbrained. I'm just like fighting. Anyways, see, I did it again. Okay, all right, back. Let's do this. As an editor, you can't write off a piece just because it doesn't share like the same views that you share. Oh my god. You can't like write off a piece because it doesn't share the same views that you share. You want to like have a diverse mind, and you want to be able to understand why something may be important to a certain group of people, a certain minority, anything like that. As a teacher, you need a diverse mind because in every situation that you come across, from lesson planning, student relations, coworkers, everything, it's diverse thinking. You have to have it. It's also just an obvious plus to any job that exists. Nursing, doctor, cop, lawyer, scientist, Big Lots furniture man. I mean, anything, literally anything that you can think of, having a diverse way of thinking is crucial. But this is one that you can argue is more common in newer writings because you want to be diverse on newer opinions. And you may say, like, sure, people wrote about their opinions back in the day. I mean, the 95 Theses started the Protestant Reformation, but, like, those are all past dealings. We need to focus on newer pieces for diversity because there's newer issues in America. There's newer this, newer that. You're right about focusing on newer pieces because we always need to focus on reading and newer pieces and all of that. But the older ways of thinking are insanely similar to newer pieces, if not introducing us to even newer ways of thinking about a certain situation that we have today. Even though the piece is like from 100 years ago, it's still important and can still show us a new way of thinking about something today. It's wild. And the piece that I think kind of opened my eyes to this skill is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. It was published in 1928, so it's almost 100 years. It's like 96, 97. So it's close enough. In this story, her main argument is that women need to stop being governed by men, and they need space to be themselves, which is where the room of one's own comes in. It's about, like, it's about like women like having the space to be able to write and create. I said that a little weird here, but I want that to be known that that's like the main like focal point is it's about giving women that space to be creative and be themselves. I you know I'm by no means downplaying the argument because I like the argument she's making, but this argument is also very prevalent in so many pieces by so many women authors. They're all equally as important, but the reason I say this is why did A Room of One's Own stand out to me the most? For me to choose it for this skill example. And that's because of the example that she creates, the fictional person that she creates within this piece. And she creates a woman to example her argument, and her name is Judith Shakespeare. Judith Shakespeare is obviously supposed to be the sister to William Shakespeare. And she says that if Judith and William were of the same intellect, the same knowledge, if they were both as smart and creative as each other, Judith still wouldn't have received the schooling, the backing, the fame that William did. Judith would have been scolded for reading and writing and was made to be a housewife, letting all of her potential creativity and knowledge die before ever truly letting it blossom. When she compares this fictional woman to Shakespeare, which is supposed to be her brother, you begin seeing the shock of how things truly were. It really puts things into perspective. Someone who was as creative and as talented as William Shakespeare, the writer of Richard III, which I still can't get over how confusing and how confused I was at that piece. Someone who wrote such a beautiful piece like that, but is going to get knocked down because she was a woman. It begins sitting with you, and you begin seeing the argument in a way that you've never seen before. I've never believed in the whole, get back in the kitchen joke to begin with, but I don't think women should be treated differently than men. But when I read this piece, I realized a new way of looking at the argument that Woolf was making. That's why this piece kind of sits with me and helps me truly gain that skill of diversity thinking. It's something that really shows you, because you can hear about it all the time. You can hear about how bad things truly were, and you're kind of like, oh, well, it's better now. I don't need to worry about that anymore. But then you realize, oh my gosh, it is insane how bad things were. So that's why it kind of sits with me a little bit. Let me get a drink here. Drink time. Everyone here, you know what we're going to do? We're going to start a cheers. A cheers segment. Every time that I take a drink, we're going to say cheers, and then we're going to drink. Grab something at home. Go to your fridge, grab something. If you have something already, that's good. I don't know if you have a cloud mug like I do, but if you already have something, awesome. Drink up. Cheers. Maybe don't chug like that. Anyways, the last skill that I have before I get into some more broad and general skills from these old texts is understanding another language. Do you remember that thing that I read earlier from Richard III? The whole, tush, fear not, my lord, we will not stand to prate. Talkers are no good doers, be assured we come to use our hands and not our tongues. Yeah, well, that's definitely not easy to read if you are newer to the English field, especially the older English field or early English field. But if you can read it somewhat easier, that's good for you. But whether you're a newer experience, learning to read this old text with early English is a skill. You have taken time to understand what these words, some of which you've never seen before, like prate probably, you've taken time to understand what they mean, what context they have, what connotation they have, why a character uses that word. You've taken time to understand all of these things, which could go back to patient. This is definitely a part of patience in a way. But understanding this early English shows signs of learning. Jobs can use your skill of learning something like that. The attention to detail would be sought after in law or anything to do with communications like corporate communicating, social media communicating. This could show you be a great editor for a company. because you read between the lines. It would make you a good teacher or professor because you can see the value in these pieces and teach it to others. And even with it being in like Old English, you can still see the value in these. And this will make you a good librarian or a historian because you can understand these types of texts, maybe even help restore or remaster certain works, which will be insane. All of these jobs can use the skill of reading an older language, like early English, in some way. They may not even know they need someone with that skill until you convince them. You show them, like, hey, this would be helpful in this situation for this certain job. They may look at you and be like, dang, you're right, bro. Come on in. $100,000 no, but like, still, it's a good skill to have for any job that you may take, even if it is a $100,000 job. Take it. Show them that learning a language like that is important. Sorry, the computer kicked off again. I need to have a word or like a segment for whenever the computer kicks off. Power down. So I'll just hold the mic up and I'll just go power down like that or something, and it we'll cheers with the mic or something. I don't know. I'm just rambling. But now I want to cover the response that people usually say for what they learned for an entire English degree, and not just like reading Old English, but just like English in its entirety. Oh, I didn't even realize you can see the egg now. Look at that. It's a chicken, but it's got the egg coming out of the butt, and then the egg is the light. I'm sorry. Scatterbrained again. I apologize. But anyways, I want to cover, like I said, like kind of like a cliche response from people that are English majors whenever they are asked like what skill they learned from their degree. Not to throw shade at the skill, because it is a very useful skill, but usually if you ask any English major what they took away from their degree, they're probably going to say, I learned problem solving. Okay. Problem solving is a big skill you learn from being an English major, especially from reading older texts. I agree. Like, during reading analysis, you may get stuck at a question or a point of the story, and you may have to consult others to find the answer for your question. You may have to do it on your own by looking at the rest of the story, or maybe from looking at the context around the place that you're stuck. But either way, you are solving a problem. You are actively seeking a solution to your question, which causes you to build that skill more and more every time you have a new question pop up, until you eventually become able to be a great problem solver. Some people will also bundle this skill in with the term creative thinker, and while it may seem like a different skill, it only is in terms of writing, I feel like. Problem solving and creative thinking run in the same vein, in my opinion. You have to sometimes think creatively to get out of a situation, like, and solve a problem. So to me, they count as like the same thing to a degree. So creative thinker and problem solver is kind of the same thing in my opinion, but it also can be different. I don't know. But I mean, every job wants a problem solver. That's 90% of what employers are looking for. Someone who can think fast on their feet to solve any issue that may arise at work. That's a highly sought after skill. I just feel like it's really cliche because, like, I think even in our capstone class, whenever Dr. Sloan was like, what have you all took away from your degree so far? We were all kind of like, problem solver. And it's like, that's the first thing that English majors go to, because that is 95% of what we think we do every single day whenever we do a reading analysis or we do, anything like that, because we are solving problems. We've got questions that are popping up and we're answering them. We're answering the questions. We're actively seeking solutions. So we think we're a problem solver. So it's cliche, but I do think that it is a necessary skill that we have learned and we can take away from our reading of like older texts. But now is like, you may be confused as to why I'm crediting this skill to reading older text rather than new text. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not necessarily saying you can't get this skill from reading newer texts. You definitely can. You obviously can. But with older texts, there are always more questions. There are more things to like sit back and question because of like how it's written, the historical context around it, the author's life, what we do and don't know about the author's life. I mean, it's all a question that we may not have from a modern piece, but look at all the pieces I've covered in this podcast so far. The yellow wallpaper, we see her become attached to this wallpaper. She becomes obsessed with the shadow within the wallpaper and thinks it's locked up behind it like a jail. And she frees the shadow by ripping the wallpaper off. You know, who is the shadow? Who is she? Who is Jane? You have to read the story to understand why I asked that. I'm sorry. All these questions arise while reading, and it makes you truly dig in to find and answer the question. In a room of one's own, why did she create Judith Shakespeare? Why does she create this room of her own situation when she could blatantly ask for her own space and separation? Why did she go the creative route? I'm glad she did, but I'm just asking the question about why did she go the creative route? It's all something that we have to figure out when reading. And that to do that, we use problem solving. Every time we take a text and we analyze it, we do problem solving on one of these older texts, which is why most English majors say that their biggest skill and takeaway from studying English is problem solving. And reading older texts, to me, seem like the biggest builder of that skill. It may just be a personal thing, but I genuinely think that that is one of the biggest ways that you can build problem solving. Why is my hair like that? Why did you all sit there and let me look like that? What the heck happened? Sorry. I should have definitely used a mirror. I have a mirror right there. I should have used that to look at my hair before I started. You all let me sit here for 51 minutes and didn't tell me that my hair looked like that. Anyways. But now I want to talk about something that is like technically a skill. It's very like niche, I feel, and a very specific skill that everyone's going to walk away from with a different like point of view. Like not everyone's going to think about it the same. There are a few pieces from around a century and a half ago that I'm really fond of. Ones that I didn't feel malicious towards, one that I was actually okay with reading and enjoyed reading off rip. And these pieces are the ones that I've kept as inspirations for my own writing. I don't take inspiration from this piece in particular, but something I do have is this bad boy right here. Almost dropped it. This is The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. This sucker is like, I think 700 years old? How old is this thing? Hold on. I'm pretty sure that this sucker's like 700 years old. I could be completely and utterly wrong about that, though. But I thought this was made in like the 1400s, 1300s, somewhere through there. I could be wrong. It's not a podcast without someone on the podcast doing research in the middle of the podcast, is it? It's one of my favorite things about podcasts is whenever you're like, they bring up something and they spend like 45 minutes searching it up on the internet. Like, dude, just give up. Anyways, yeah. So 1321 is when this sucker right here was written. I look at some of the readings in here. I'm going to turn to a random part. I am on Inferno, Canto. What number is that? 27. I'm on Canto 27. Let me read a little bit of this. There let thy conversation be concise. Till thou returnest, I will speak with him, that he concede to us his stalwart shoulders. Thus farther his opinion, thus farther still upon the outermost head of that seventh circle, all alone, I went where sat the melancholy folk, out of their eyes was gushing forth. What does that mean? I mean, they're like, you struggle to read this, right? But this is still a piece that latched on to me because it just, you need it. You need to understand what it is because it's such an important piece. And another one of those pieces that really latched on to me was Edgar Allan Poe. I am a massive Edgar Allan Poe fan, massive Edgar Allan Poe nerd. I will openly admit to you that I'm very cliche, and I do think that Annabelle Lee is probably my favorite poem by him. I know it's cliche, I know, but he's just such a good poet. Sure, a little bit of a weird man, but he's cool. And these pieces can make aspiring writers want to take inspiration from those texts and put it into their own. Maybe it's because they feel older writings have this sense of charm or way of thinking that newer writings don't. Maybe they just like the style. Either way, they take it as inspiration. And like I said, I turned to Edgar Allan Poe when I was in high school because I had to memorize The Raven, very cliche, but I had to memorize The Raven for a poetry out loud competition, which is where you memorize poetry and you read it in front of the whole school. I lost. And the one I had to read was The Raven, and ever since then I have just been the biggest Edgar Allan Poe fan that I know personally. Probably not in the world, but let's just say that one of the top things on my bucket list is I want to visit his grave. Anyways, I began writing poetry when I started college, and I realized that most of my pieces were dark and gave off similar vibes to Poe's work. One piece I wrote was actually for an assignment, and it was titled The Figure. And my work is by no means good. I don't want you to think that, but I will read it to you, and I'll also throw it up on the screen and post. I'll go in and I'll put it somewhere on the screen. I don't know where, but I will put it on there somewhere. But I want to read this to you because there's a reason I'm doing this. Sorry, I didn't have it pulled up. It closed for some reason. So I want to read this to you. No matter where I go, I am constantly followed. The feeling of someone behind me every step I take. Through empty hallways or busy streets, I keep looking over my shoulder, just to see that no one is there. I hear the voice of a non-existent figure, telling me I'm not good enough, telling me that everyone hates me, telling me to end it all, yet when I turn around, no one is there. I hear the footsteps of this obscene figure everywhere, when the volume of my music is louder than my thoughts, when my loved ones tell me how proud they are of me, when someone tells me they love me. I turn around to find the source of the footsteps. However, when I turn around, no one is there. I try to run from this perplexing figure. I walk until the shoes on my feet are destroyed. I run until my lungs reach the point of collapse. I drive until my wallet can no longer afford the expedition. Yet no matter where I arrive, the figure arrives behind me. I finally reach my breaking point. I fall to my knees as tears begin streaming down my face. I yell to the pitter-patter following close behind me. Why? Why do you have to follow me? However, my question is met with no answer. I begin crawling as my knees feel heavier than before. I dig my fingers deep into the mud and propel myself forward. I continue for what feels like hours. Left arm, right arm, left arm, right arm. Even when I reach the point where I cannot be followed, I hear the sounds of footsteps yet again. Not good. Not a good piece whatsoever. But, I looked at that piece after I wrote it. And I was like, oh, no. That sounds like a Poe piece. That sounds like a Poe poem. A poem. Anyways, the darkness, the feeling of depression, the looming reference to what could be death, maybe something haunting, all of it sounded like it was inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, look at this compared to The Raven, his, most iconic piece, I'm pretty sure. This thing that follows him, the Raven, the thing that follows me, this shadowy figure, the language, the acknowledgement of this figure in a begging sort of way when Edgar says he was sleeping. I don't know why I said first name. I'm not on a first name basis with him. I say, why are you following me? It just sounded similar. And I didn't even mean to, besides just taking that inspiration of the poem being dark. I didn't even mean for it to sound similar to The Raven. It was not my intention. And then I also asked one of my friends and a fellow English major, Jaden, shout out to her for helping me with this. She said that she takes influence from older authors as well whenever she writes. And she actually takes inspiration from some authors I've mentioned in this story, like Virginia Woolf, and she takes inspiration from Emily Dickinson. And those authors, both of them we've discussed in class before. And like I said, I even talked about Virginia Woolf earlier with A Room of One's Own. But Jaden said this whenever I asked her like how they inspire her. She said, I really love the way Emily Dickinson writes because it's very vague but powerful. I use this as a way to remind myself that sometimes less is better. Woolf advocates for women to be able to write and have space and time to do so, which is really inspirational in itself. She's also a major stream of consciousness gal like myself. So, I mean, there's Jaden taking inspiration from authors that are from the late 1800s and early 1900s. And there's myself taking inspiration from a poet from the early 1800s. And we're both showing that these pieces that are 100 or over 100 years old. Oh, computer turned off. Power down or power off check. Cheers, whatever. But there, me and Jaden are, both of us, taking inspiration from these pieces that at one point we may have looked at and said, what's even the point of this? Why are we still learning this? Why is this still important? And, sure, and they still matter. Sure, even though Edgar Allan Poe never got to experience a Cool Ranch Dorito, like, his and everyone else's work from the time are still influential and thought-provoking all the way up to 2025. And they can still teach us skills to learn for our jobs moving forward. Skills we can use if you're still in college, skills that you can use while you're still in college. Skills we can use no matter where we go. These pieces teach us that. And I may not have even covered some of the skills that these pieces teach us. There are dozens more that you can actually take away from this. These are just what I think is the most important. And the reason why I'm focusing on skills like this is because we took a test in my capstone class. And the test was to see what our strengths and our weaknesses were. And my weakness was identifying your strengths. And I feel like this right here really helped me identify my strengths. And it really helped me see, like, what am I good at? What do I feel like I'm good at? And I looked at all of these on this script, and as I said it out loud, and I think that I have been able to actually identify something I'm good at, which that exam said was my biggest weakness. So when you looked at whatever piece you looked at from over 100 years ago that you were reading, and you said, man, there's no way this sucker can mean anything important. I really hope that doesn't sound like I said a swear word there, because I said sucker. Anyways, why am I reading this? Well, I hope I kind of just answered that. I hope that I actually gave a really good and concise answer to that question. Why do we still need that? Like, I hope you understand how these older readings can still change the world today and inspire people in ways that are new to us. Pieces that are over 100 years old can still change the world today in many ways that readings from today cannot. Literally, readings that come out today can't change the world like these pieces can. And they're still teaching us skills in college that we can take into our careers in the future. All this time later. That's why we read older texts in college. Thank you all for watching this mess of a podcast. Thank you all for watching me drink my Fiji water and hearing me gulp it down because I kept forgetting to mute the mic. Thank you all for looking at my boy over here on the desk for the last hour. Thank you all for everything. Thank you all for being here. And I hope that I shed a little bit of light on why we need these pieces still. Why is it still taught in school, in college, wherever? That's why. What I just said is why. Thank you all.
I'm out.
Oh my god, I've got a headache.